When the car crashed, Ethan Sullivan's first instinct wasn't to shield me in the passenger seat. He unbuckled his seatbelt, threw open the door, and carried Chloe Bennett out from the back seat. I was trapped in the crumpled door, blood streaming down my forehead and into my eyes. He stood 3 meters away, holding Chloe tight and shouting, "Chloe, wake up." I bit back the pain and called his name. He glanced back at me and said, "Wait a second." She passed out. In that moment, the pain suddenly vanished. Truly, I learned then that when your heart shatters completely, even pain lags a beat behind. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedic asked who my next of kin was. Ethan climbed into the other ambulance with Chloe in his arms. I lay on the stretcher and heard a nurse mutter under her breath, "What kind of man is that?" I closed my eyes. For the first time, I thought she was being too gentle. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital room. I had 6 stitches on my forehead, a fractured left arm, and scrapes all over my legs. The nurse changed my dressing and saw me staring at the door. She asked softly, "Your husband still hasn't come?" I tugged at the corner of my mouth. "He's busy." The nurse didn't reply. The sympathy in her eyes stung worse than my wounds. My phone vibrated twice on the nightstand. I thought it was Ethan. It was a voice message from Mrs. Sullivan. "Lena, don't be so petty. Chloe's always had a weak constitution. It's only natural that Ethan took care of her first. You're his wife. You need to be considerate. Besides, you're fine, right? Making a big scene will just embarrass everyone." I listened to it, transcribed it to text, took a screenshot, and saved it. A second message came right after. "Oh, and Chloe hasn't stopped crying since she woke up, saying it's all her fault. Go see her when you can and comfort her. Don't let her carry this guilt." I laughed out loud. The movement pulled my stitches, and the pain made my vision go black. The nurse jumped and quickly held my shoulders. "Don't move," I said. "Sorry, I just heard a joke." At 9 o'clock that night, Ethan finally showed up. He was holding a bowl of porridge. Not the pumpkin oatmeal I loved, but the creamy seafood rice soup Chloe adored. "I'm allergic to seafood." He set the bowl down on the nightstand, his brow furrowed. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" I looked at him. "Did you even call me?" He froze mid-motion. "I was too busy. I forgot. Too busy taking care of Chloe." His face darkened. "Lena Carter, don't be sarcastic." I stared at the wrinkled shirt he was wearing. A faint dried bloodstain on the cuff. It wasn't my blood. It was Chloe's. It was surreal. 3 years of marriage, and he'd never once asked where I was hurt when I was bleeding. But Chloe had a tiny scratch on the back of her hand, and he'd sat with her for 8 hours. I said, "Ethan, I want a divorce." He looked like he hadn't heard me. "What did you say?" "Divorce." He stared at me for a few seconds, then scoffed. "Just because of that split second during the crash." I smiled too. "Yes, just because of that split second." He slammed the bowl down hard. "Lena, can you stop being so dramatic?" It was chaos back there. Chloe was in the back seat, which took the worst of the impact. What was wrong with me saving her first? I slowly raised my uninjured right hand and pointed to my forehead. I was trapped in the car. The door was smoking. "Did you see that?" He looked away. I asked again. "When the doctor asked for my next of kin, where were you?" He didn't speak. "You climbed into the other ambulance with her." I stared at him. "Ethan, I'm not mad that you saved her. I'm mad that when I called your name, you told me to wait." The only sound in the room was the soft beeping of the medical equipment. His lips moved. "I thought you could hold on." I nodded. "You always thought that. You thought I could hold on. You thought I didn't hurt. You thought I'd always be considerate. You thought I'd never leave." Ethan rubbed his temples irritably. "You're injured and emotional. We'll talk about divorce when you've calmed down." I pulled a file folder out from under my pillow. Inside were copies of my documents and the divorce application my friend had dropped off that afternoon. "I'm perfectly calm." When he saw the papers, his face finally changed. "Lena, you're serious about this? You always said I couldn't live without you, didn't you?" I pushed the file folder to the edge of the bed. Let's find out. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw panic in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual arrogance. Stop this nonsense. My phone suddenly rang. He glanced down and answered immediately. I heard Chloe's tearful voice on the other end. Ethan. I had a nightmare. Ethan looked up at me. I stared back calmly. He said, I'm on my way. After hanging up, he looked relieved to have an excuse. Chloe's not doing well. I have to go. We'll talk tomorrow. I said, Ethan, if you walk out that door today, there is no tomorrow for us. He paused for a second. Lena. Don't threaten me with this. The door closed. The hospital room fell silent again. I picked up the bowl of porridge and pressed the call button. When the nurse came in, I handed it to her. Could you throw this away for me, please? The nurse glanced at the porridge. Then at me. What would you like to eat? I'll go buy it from downstairs. I froze. A stranger's simple kindness made my eyes burn. I looked down. Plain oatmeal is fine. Half an hour later, the nurse brought me a bowl of plain oatmeal and a marinated hard-boiled egg. She said, It's on me. Don't cry. I took a bite of the egg. Tears fell into the oatmeal. For 3 years, I'd memorized Ethan's preferences better than my own birthday. He hated green onions, so I never put them in our food. He had a weak stomach, so I always kept antacids in my bag. He worked late into the night, and no matter how tired I was, I'd wait up for him and leave a light on. But he couldn't remember what I was allergic to. He couldn't see when I was hurt. A stranger knew I needed a warm bowl of oatmeal. He didn't. The next morning, Ethan didn't come. Mrs. Sullivan did. She pushed the door open, carrying a fruit basket, with Chloe trailing behind her. Chloe was wearing a white dress, her face indeed a little pale. A tiny band-aid covered the back of her hand. When she saw me, her eyes immediately welled up with tears. Lena. I'm so sorry. I leaned against the headboard and looked at her. What are you sorry for? She bit her lip. If I hadn't asked for a ride, none of this would have happened. Mrs. Sullivan quickly patted her hand. Silly girl. The accident wasn't your fault. Then she turned to me. Lena. Chloe came all this way to see you. The least you could do is not give her the cold shoulder. I laughed. She came to apologize empty-handed. Chloe's face stiffened. Mrs. Sullivan frowned. You're being so petty. Petty. I looked up at her. I was trapped in the car. And your son carried her away first. She comes to apologize with nothing. And you're telling me not to be petty. Mrs. Sullivan's face turned ugly. Ethan was just being loyal to his friends. Then me getting divorced is also being loyal to myself. Mrs. Sullivan froze. Divorce. What are you talking about? A flash of triumph crossed Chloe's eyes. Gone so fast I almost missed it. I'd watched her act for 3 years. I knew all her tricks. Mrs. Sullivan raised her voice. Lena Carter, have you lost your mind? You want a divorce over something this small? Something this small. I unlocked my phone and pulled up a short video of the accident scene. A passerby had filmed it. In the video, the front of the car was crumpled, and the passenger door wouldn't open. I was sitting inside, my forehead covered in blood. Banging on the window. Ethan was standing on the side of the road, holding Chloe and calling her name over and over. A bystander was shouting, "There's someone else in there. Save her first." But Ethan didn't even look back. The comments below the video were blowing up. Isn't the one in the passenger seat his wife? The girl in the back looks fine to me. Men are terrifying. You can tell who's really in their heart in a crisis. His wife's blood is covering her eyes. And he's holding someone else. I handed my phone to Mrs. Sullivan. Look. Do the internet strangers also think this is something small? Her face paled. She clearly hadn't expected someone to film it. Chloe reacted faster, tears spilling down her cheeks instantly. Lena. Did you post this? I don't care if people yell at me. I just don't want it to hurt Ethan. I almost clapped. In one sentence. She'd pinned the blame on me for ruining Ethan's reputation. I said flatly. I didn't post it. She choked. I continued. But you just reminded me. I hit the share button. I should save a copy too, just in case someone calls me overly sensitive someday. Chloe's face turned 2 shades whiter. Mrs. Sullivan panicked. Delete that right now. If our acquaintances see this, how will Ethan show his face? I looked up. If he doesn't care about his face, why should I protect it for him? Mrs. Sullivan lunged to grab my phone. A voice suddenly came from the doorway. The patient just had her dressing changed. She can't get upset. I looked up. A man in a white coat stood there, holding a clipboard. His eyes were cold as they swept over Mrs. Sullivan, then landed on my wound. One more outburst, and I'll call security. Mrs. Sullivan choked. She loved throwing her weight around as an elder, but she cared too much about her image in front of strangers. Chloe said softly, Asher. We just came to visit Lena. Asher Grant. I remembered that name. He was the one who'd pulled me out of the crumpled car the night of the accident. Before I passed out, I'd seen him drape his coat over me, his voice like ice. Don't sleep, Lena Carter. Do you hear me? The nurse told me later that he'd pressed on my wound the entire way to the operating room. He'd also said something about Ethan, something very direct. I hadn't had the strength to ask then, now that I saw Chloe knew him. I wasn't surprised. Our social circle was small. Everyone knew everyone. Asher didn't even look at Chloe. Visiting is fine. Upsetting the patient is not. Mrs. Sullivan forced a smile. Dr. Grant. We're her family. Asher flipped open my chart. Family. He looked up. When the patient was admitted the night of the accident, the next of kin field was blank. Mrs. Sullivan's face turned bright red. Chloe's tears froze in her eyes. Unsure whether to fall or not, I felt a surge of relief. Some things don't need to be argued. The facts speak louder than any words. Mrs. Sullivan dragged Chloe away. Before she left, she threw over her shoulder. Wait till Ethan gets here. He'll set you straight. After the door closed, Asher set down the chart. Do they always treat you like this? I stared out the window. They used to be nicer. He was silent for 2 seconds. You used to put up with a lot. I smiled slightly. Are all doctors this good at hitting a nerve? No. He set the medication on the nightstand. Only with patients who don't value themselves. I looked up at him. His expression was neutral. Lena Carter. The first thing you said at the accident scene was Ethan's name. My fingers froze. What was the second thing? Asher looked at me. You said, don't save me. My heart felt like it had been tapped with a hammer. I didn't remember that. Truly, I didn't. Asher said. I don't like hearing things like that. I stared at him, suddenly lost for words. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Also, you did the right thing throwing away that seafood porridge. I froze. He didn't look back. You're allergic. The door closed. I stared at it. A strange ache spreading through my chest. Something Ethan had failed to remember in 3 years of marriage. Asher Grant had learned from reading my chart once. That afternoon, Ethan came. He wasn't alone this time. He brought Chloe with him. Chloe kept her head down, holding a bouquet of lilies. I'm also allergic to lily pollen. Ethan set the flowers on the nightstand. Chloe insisted on coming to apologize. I stared at the bouquet and pressed the call button. When the nurse arrived, I pointed to the flowers. Could you take these out? Please. Thank you. Ethan frowned. What now? I said. Allergy. He froze. Chloe immediately covered her mouth. I'm so sorry. Lena. I had no idea. I looked at her. It's normal that you didn't know. It's ridiculous that he didn't. Ethan's face stiffened. The nurse took the flowers away, leaving the 3 of us alone in the room. Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed, his voice softening. Lena. I was wrong yesterday. I shouldn't have left. I didn't speak. He continued. I admit I panicked during the crash and didn't look out for you. But you can't throw away 3 years of marriage over one mistake. I stared at the 4 in the back of my hand. One mistake. I opened my phone's photo album. It was full of screenshots. The first was from last winter, When I had a fever of 103.6 degrees, I'd texted him, "Can you come home? I don't think I can make it." He'd replied, "Chloe's pipe burst. I'm going over to help." That night, I'd taken a taxi to the hospital alone and sat through an 4 drip until 3 in the morning. The second was from my birthday. I'd cooked a whole meal and waited for him until midnight. He'd posted a photo on Instagram stories. In it, Chloe was wearing a birthday hat, smiling brightly. The caption read, "Celebrating my favorite kid's birthday." I'd commented below, "Did you forget it's my birthday too?" He'd replied to my DM 2 hours later, "Don't make a scene in public." The third was from the anniversary of my mom's death. I'd asked him to come to the cemetery with me. He'd said he was busy, but that same day, Chloe had posted a photo at the beach. The edge of the frame showed the watch he always wore. I flipped through them one by one for him to see. "Look, Ethan, it's not one mistake. It's mistake after mistake. I made excuses for you, excuses for her, until I lost myself entirely." Ethan's face grew darker and darker. Chloe said, her eyes red, "Lena, you're misunderstanding. Ethan only sees me as a sister." I looked up at her. "Do you lack a brother?" She froze. I said, "Don't you have your own family?" Her eyes welled up more. "We just grew up together. So what?" I stared at her. "Growing up together gives you the right to call him over in the middle of the night after he's married. Growing up together gives you the right to have him spend your birthday with you instead of his wife. Growing up together gives you the right to push me out of his mind during a car crash." Chloe's tears finally fell. "I didn't," I said softly. "You did." She looked up at me. I turned my phone toward her. "You always timed it perfectly. Every time I needed him, you showed up. Every time I took a step back, you took a step forward. You never explicitly stole him, but you were always testing the waters." The mask of gentleness on Chloe's face cracked for a second. Ethan stood up. "Enough." I looked at him. "Are you feeling sorry for her?" He gritted his teeth. "Lena, don't make people out to be monsters." I laughed. "Ethan, I didn't used to think that either. Then I realized that only the clean people are always mopping the floor. The dirty ones just keep stepping on it." At that, Chloe's face went completely white. Ethan looked at me. His eyes filled with anger and a fear he didn't even recognize himself. "You're not the same person I married." I said. "Good." The old Lena Carter didn't recognize herself either. He stared at me for a long time, then suddenly reached for the file folder on my nightstand. I sat up immediately, wincing as my wound pulled. "Give that back." Ethan clutched the folder tightly. "We'll talk when you've calmed down." I lunged to grab it, but he stepped back. The next second, the door slammed open. Asher stood in the doorway, his face icy. "She told you to give it back." Ethan looked at him. "This is a family matter." Asher walked into the room. "Stealing from a patient in her hospital room is not a family matter." Ethan scoffed. "You're overstepping." "Dr. Grant." Asher ignored him and looked only at me. "Should I call the police?" Ethan's face changed. Chloe hurried forward. "Asher, don't." Ethan didn't mean it. Asher finally looked at her. "Chloe Bennett, you'd better shut up." Chloe froze. I was surprised too. Ethan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Asher's voice was flat. "I've seen the dashcam footage from the accident." The air in the room thickened. Chloe's hands flew into her sleeves. Ethan asked, "What dashcam footage?" Asher looked at him. "Yours was broken, but the truck that hit you had one. 20 seconds before the crash." Someone in the back seat leaned forward suddenly and grabbed the back of the driver's seat. Ethan whirled around to look at Chloe. All the color drained from her face. "No, I was just scared," Asher continued. The driver turned his head to look at her 1 second before swerving. I stared at Ethan. The shock on his face wasn't fake. He hadn't known either. Chloe finally panicked. "I didn't do it on purpose. I was just scared. The car was going so fast. I grabbed you out of fear." A memory flashed through my mind from right before the crash. I'd been warning Ethan. "That truck ahead is crossing the line." Before Ethan could react, Chloe had suddenly screamed from the back seat. Ethan. Then the car had swerved violently. Then the impact. I'd always thought it was just panic in the chaos. Now I knew that some accidents are just people pushing their panic onto others. Ethan looked at Chloe. Why did you grab me? Chloe shook her head, crying. I really didn't mean it. I was just afraid you'd leave me. At those words, the room fell deathly silent. Ethan looked like he'd been slapped. I laughed, finally telling the truth. Chloe covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean it like that. I've just been so dependent on you lately. Ethan stared at her, his expression complicated. Before, the second she cried, he'd caved immediately. This time, he didn't move. I suddenly felt bored. I'd spent years fighting to get his attention away from Chloe. Now that he was finally seeing the truth, I didn't want it anymore. I held out my hand. The file folder. Ethan hesitated, then handed it back. I put it back under my pillow. Get out. Ethan looked at me. Lena. I cut him off. I'm not asking you to choose anymore. I'm telling you. He stood there, like he was hearing me speak for the first time. I closed my eyes. Ethan. I don't hurt anymore. That's not forgiveness. That's nothing. He didn't say another word. I heard Chloe's muffled sobs in the hallway. Then Ethan's footsteps, walking away. That night, I slept deeply. There were no car crashes in my dreams. No Ethan Sullivan. Just a bowl of warm oatmeal, a marinated hard-boiled egg, and Asher's voice saying, I don't like hearing things like that. On the third day, the accident video went viral. I hadn't posted it, but once it gained traction, everyone in our circle saw it. Ethan called dozens of times. I didn't answer any. Mrs. Sullivan called from a different number, crying as soon as I picked up. Lena, I know you're hurt, but what couple doesn't fight? Please say something to clear Ethan's name. I asked. Say what? Say it was all a misunderstanding in the video. Say you two are still happy. I laughed. Didn't you say yesterday that he'd set me straight? Her voice faltered. That was just me being angry. I was really injured. He really saved someone else first. The next of kin field was really blank. I stared out the window. I won't lie about things that are true. Mrs. Sullivan panicked. Are you trying to ruin him? I was silent for a few seconds. Mom. She thought I was softening. Her voice immediately gentle. Yes, Lena. I said. That's the last time I'll call you that. I didn't ruin him. He just got caught. There was silence on the other end. I hung up and blocked her number. I'd just set down my phone when there was a knock on the door. Asher stood in the doorway. Got a minute? I nodded. He handed me new test results. You're recovering well. You can be discharged in 2 days if we keep an eye on you. I took the papers. Thank you. He glanced at me. Got a lot of calls today. The Sullivans. I smiled. How did you know? Your phone was vibrating like a fire alarm. I couldn't help laughing at his deadpan expression. Dr. Grant. It's rude to eavesdrop on your patients. The door was open. You could have not listened. It's hard to ignore when someone's bullying my patient. I looked up. Asher was leaning against the foot of the bed, a pen tucked in the pocket of his white coat. He wasn't smiling. But something in my chest felt light. I asked, why are you helping me? He looked at me. What do you think? Because you're a doctor. Doctors save lives. They don't necessarily get involved in personal drama. I didn't speak. He didn't push me. After a moment, he set a folded piece of paper on my nightstand. This is a copy of the accident report. You'll need it for the paperwork later. I opened it. It was clear and concise. The truck driver was primarily at fault for the crash. But our driver was also partially responsible for distracted driving. Distracted driving. Those 4 words stung like needles. Ethan wasn't blameless. He just never thought he was. I folded the paper and put it away. Thank you, Asher said. Stop saying thank you. I looked up. What should I say instead? He said flatly. Say you'll live well. I froze. His eyes met mine. Like he could see all the dark thoughts I hadn't said out loud. I suddenly remembered the accident scene. I'd said, Don't save me. It hadn't been a moment of anger. In that split second, I'd truly thought there was no point. I'd loved Ethan Sullivan for 7 years. From college to marriage. I'd made myself a lamp behind him. When he turned around, I was on. When he didn't, I was still on. Until the wick burned out completely. I looked at Asher. I will live well. He nodded. Remember that. There was a sudden rush of footsteps outside. Ethan burst through the door. His hair was messy. Stubble covered his chin. And he looked like he hadn't slept all night. When he saw Asher, his face immediately darkened. What are you doing here? Asher checked his watch. Making rounds. Ethan scoffed. Making rounds includes asking about your patient's personal life. Asher's tone didn't change. A patient's emotional state affects their recovery. That's part of my job. Ethan stepped forward. Asher Grant. Don't hide behind your doctor title. I spoke up. Ethan. He immediately looked at me, the fire in his eyes dimming slightly. Lena. I need to talk to you. I said. I don't want to talk. He froze. I'd never refused him like this before. I'd always been afraid of tiring him, annoying him, seeming unreasonable. Now I was only afraid of taking too long to heal. Ethan walked to the bed. I sent Chloe home. I won't have anything to do with her anymore. I didn't react. He continued. I'm changing. Lena. I'm changing for you. I looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I want another chance. It's too late. At those 2 words, the color drained from his face. Lena. 7-year CRE just going to throw it all away? I asked. Weren't you the one who threw it all away in that split second during the crash? He opened his mouth. No words came out. I pulled out the file folder. 2 o'clock this afternoon. County clerk's office. He stared at the papers. His Adam's apple bobbing. You're really going through with this? Yes. What if I don't show up? I looked at him. Then I'll file the paperwork. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. His grip wasn't tight, but my left arm was injured. And I gasped in pain. Asher immediately grabbed his hand. Let go. Ethan stared at him, his eyes cold enough to start a fight. She's my wife, I said. Every word clear. Not for much longer. Ethan's hand fell away. He looked at me, his eyes red. Lena. I really didn't mean to leave you that day. I know. He looked hopeful. I continued. But your instinct was to choose her. Instinct is more honest than any explanation. He stood there, completely silent. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I went to the county clerk's office in a wheelchair. Asher had tried to talk me out of it, saying I wasn't well enough to travel. I said, if I don't go now, my heart will rot before my wounds heal. He stared at me for a few seconds, then grabbed his coat. I'll drive you. I froze. That's not appropriate. It's less appropriate for you to go alone with a broken arm and injured leg. He drove smoothly. At a red light, I saw a candy apple stand on the side of the road. A long time ago, Ethan had bought me one. We'd just started dating. He'd ridden a dockless rental bike across half the city to hand it to me. He'd said, Lena Carter, I'll buy you anything you want. Forever. Later, I'd wanted less and less. I'd only wanted him to come home early. He couldn't even do that. Asher followed my gaze. Want one? I snapped out of it. No. 3 minutes later, he pulled over. When he came back, he was holding a candy apple. I froze. He said, your eyes give you away when you're lying. I took the candy apple. The sugar shell cracked when I bit into it. The sourness hit me, and my eyes burned again. Asher didn't look at me, just restarted the car. Don't cry while you're eating. You'll choke. I bit into the apple, mumbling, you're so annoying, he said flatly. The person who saved your life is very annoying. Ethan was already waiting at the county clerk's office. He was wearing a black coat, standing in the wind. When he saw Asher, his face turned ugly. Why is he driving you? I said. Because you didn't drive me to the hospital after the crash. Ethan's face went white. Asher didn't get out of the car. He just said, I'll wait for you outside. I nodded. Ethan's face darkened even more when he saw me nod. When did you two get so close? I looked up at him. Ethan. Don't you think that's a ridiculous question to ask right now? He clutched his document bag. Then laughed bitterly. I never realized how good you are at making me angry. I pushed my wheelchair inside. I used to be too busy making you happy. The paperwork went quickly. So quickly that Ethan tried to speak several times, only to be interrupted by the clerk. Photos. Signatures. Confirmation. The clerk asked us, "Are you both doing this voluntarily?" I said, "Yes." Ethan stared at me, silent. The clerk looked up. "Sir." Ethan's eyes never left my face. "Lena, think again," I said. "I've been thinking for 7 years. That's long enough." The light in his eyes slowly died. Finally, he whispered, "Yes." When I held the divorce decree in my hand, I didn't cry like I'd imagined. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I just felt a weight lift off my shoulders, like something I'd been carrying for years had finally fallen away. Ethan stood by the door, not moving. He stared at the divorce papers, then suddenly asked, "Did you stop loving me a long time ago?" I thought for a second. "No." He looked up. I said, "Every time you chose someone else, you made me love you a little less, until there was nothing left for me to try for." His eyes filled with tears. It was the first time I'd ever seen Ethan Sullivan cry. He'd always been so sure. Sure I'd wait. Sure I'd forgive. Sure I loved him too much to ever leave. Now he finally understood that people don't leave suddenly. Every disappointment signs its name in your heart. Today was just the final stamp. Outside the county clerk's office, Asher was standing under an umbrella. I hadn't noticed it had started raining. Ethan saw him too. He suddenly stepped in front of me. "Lena, is this because of him?" I almost laughed. "Ethan, don't flatter yourself. I left you because you weren't worth it, not because another man was." Asher heard that, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Ethan's face turned ugly. "Then what is he to you?" I looked at Asher. He looked back at me. "Not pushing. Not asking." I said, "He's the person who didn't tell me to wait when I was dying." Ethan froze completely. Rain hammered against the umbrella. I turned my wheelchair and rolled past him. As I passed, he whispered, "Lena, I regret it." I paused. An old pain pricked my heart. Not deep, but still there. I didn't look back. "You regret it because I left, not because I hurt." With that, I rolled into Asher's umbrella. Asher bent down and lowered the umbrella over me. "Cold." I shook my head. "Hungry." He glanced at me. "What do you want to eat?" I thought for a second. "Plain oatmeal, and a marinated hard-boiled egg." A faint smile touched his lips. "Okay." As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Ethan was still standing there. The rain was soaking his shoulders. He didn't chase after me. He had no right to. The first week after the divorce, I moved into my own studio apartment. It was small, 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, with a balcony that got sunlight. I packed all of Ethan's things into cardboard boxes. Couple mugs, old scarves, his discarded ties, the wrist guards I'd bought him that he'd never opened. At the bottom of a closet, I found a metal box. Inside were all our old photos. College campus, street fairs, the beach, our first apartment. In the photos, Ethan smiled. He'd drape his coat over my shoulders. He'd panic and hand me tissues when I cried. I stared at them, suddenly confused. When had he changed? Or had he never changed? Had Chloe just shown up, and the order of his heart had finally revealed itself? My phone rang. It was Ethan. I didn't answer. He texted, "Lena, I'm downstairs." I walked to the window and looked down. He was standing at the entrance of the apartment complex, holding a thermos. The rain had stopped, but his hair was still wet. He'd been standing there a long time. My phone vibrated again. I made pumpkin oatmeal. I stared at the text for a few seconds. 3 years of marriage, and this was the first time he'd ever made me pumpkin oatmeal. But I didn't want it anymore. I replied, "Don't come here anymore." He texted back immediately, "You used to love this." I smiled. Used to. What a convenient word. People always use the past to make you feel guilty when they've missed their chance. I typed. The old Lena Carter is gone too. Then I blocked him. The next day, Chloe showed up at my door. She was standing downstairs, dressed all in white, like she was going to a funeral. I almost didn't let her in, but she texted, "Lena, I have something to show you about Ethan." I stared at the message, then went downstairs. Not because of Ethan, because I knew Chloe never showed up without an agenda. Her kindness always hid a knife. At the coffee shop down the street, she sat by the window. When she saw me, she stood up immediately. "Lena." I sat down. "Talk." She bit her lip. "Are you really never coming back? Is that any of your business?" She stirred her coffee slowly. "I just think 7 years is a long time to throw away." I laughed. "Aren't you tired of playing the innocent bystander?" Her hand froze. When she looked up again, the tears were gone. "Lena Carter, you think you've won, don't you?" I looked at her, finally dropping the act. "Good. I preferred efficiency." Chloe leaned back in her chair. "You think Ethan's chasing you now because he loves you. It's just guilt. Guilt fades. When he gets over it, he'll come back to me. We've known each other for 20 years. What do you have to compare to that?" I took a sip of water. "I have a divorce decree." Her face stiffened. I said, "If you were so sure, you wouldn't be here. You're scared." Chloe. Her eyes flashed. "Scared of what?" "Scared that he's finally seeing you for who you are." I set my cup down. "You weren't scared that day during the crash. You were jealous. You heard me tell Ethan to stop seeing you so much, so you grabbed him on purpose." Chloe's fingers tightened around her cup. I continued. "You didn't want to kill me. You just wanted to prove something. You wanted to prove that no matter what, he'd choose you." She stared at me, her jaw tight. "But you didn't win either," I said softly. "You're right. I didn't win." So I left the table. That made her face even uglier. She'd wanted to see me break, to see me fight, to see me keep competing for Ethan. But I wasn't competing anymore. A man I didn't want wasn't worth fighting over. Chloe suddenly laughed. "Don't act so high and mighty, Lena. You can't tell me you don't hate me." I did. "And now? Now I just think you're disgusting." She stood up abruptly and threw her coffee at me. I'd been expecting it, and I dodged to the side. The coffee hit the wall, splattering everywhere. Everyone in the shop turned to look. The gentleness was completely gone from Chloe's face. "Lena Carter, who do you think you are? Why do you always look down on me?" I looked up at her. "Because you're making a fool of yourself." She raised her hand to hit me. A hand grabbed her wrist from behind. Ethan stood behind her, his face deathly pale. Chloe froze. "Ethan." Ethan looked at her. "Did you do it on purpose that day?" Chloe panicked. "No. Let me explain. I heard everything you just said." Her lips trembled. "I was just so scared of losing you." Ethan stared at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "So you almost killed Lena." "I didn't. I never wanted to hurt her. I just wanted you to see me. You used to care about me more than anything. But after you married her, you started looking at her." I laughed out loud. She actually thought Ethan had ever looked at me. How ironic. One woman felt neglected. Another woman felt never chosen. And the man in the middle had enjoyed both their sacrifices. Ethan stepped back. Chloe tried to grab him. He pulled away. Real panic crossed her face. "Ethan, don't leave me." I picked up my bag to leave. Ethan suddenly looked at me. "Lena." I stopped. He walked over to me, his eyes filled with unbearable pain. "I'm sorry." That one sentence. I'd waited years for it. I'd waited for it on my birthday. I'd waited for it on my mom's anniversary. I'd waited for it every night he'd come home late. I'd waited for it at the accident scene. And now I finally did it. But it was too late. An apology that comes too late is like cold food. You can look at it, but you can't eat it. I said. "I heard you." A flicker of hope lit up his eyes. I continued. "But I don't need it anymore." That light went out. I walked past him. Chloe was screaming and crying behind me. But Ethan didn't comfort her. I heard him say to Chloe, Don't ever come near me again. Chloe shrieked. What am I supposed to do then? Ethan was silent for a long time. That day, when Lena was trapped in the car, no one asked her what she was supposed to do. I paused for a second. If he'd said that the day of the accident, I probably would have cried. Now, it just made me laugh. You can teach someone a lesson 100 times, and they won't learn. But one life-altering event, and they get it instantly. But why should the person who was broken have to wait for them to learn? I walked out of the coffee shop. Asher's car was parked on the side of the road. He rolled down the window. Done. I froze. What are you doing here? Passing by. Dr. Grant, do you live on this street? No. Is the hospital on this street? No. He said deadpan. I took a detour to pass by. I couldn't help laughing. I got in the car, and he handed me a pack of wet wipes. I looked down and saw a spot of coffee on my sleeve. How did you know I'd get coffee on me? Chloe seems like the type to throw coffee. I looked at him. You know her well. She threw ink on me when we were kids. I perked up. You've known her a long time too. Then why didn't you like her? Asher stared straight ahead. When she was 10, she pushed a neighbor's kid down. Then cried and said the kid had called her names first. I froze. You saw it. I saw it. Did you tell everyone? I did. And no one believed you. Asher glanced at me. They did. But she cried so hard she passed out. So everyone ended up comforting her. I was silent for a few seconds. That's why you told her to shut up so easily. Practice. I laughed so hard my wound pulled. And I gasped. Asher immediately slowed down. Don't laugh so hard. Then stop making me laugh. I'm not making you laugh. I'm stating facts. I stared at the street passing by outside the window. The heavy stone that had been sitting on my chest for so long finally cracked. The wind old get in. The light could get in the days that followed. Ethan didn't disappear. He started showing up in all kinds of ways. Sometimes it was pumpkin oatmeal left at my door. Sometimes it was fruit delivered by courier. Sometimes it was a bag of fresh vegetables. I returned everything I could. What I couldn't return, I gave to the security guard. The security guard ate fruit for 3 days and couldn't stop smiling. Girl, your ex-husband is loaded. I said. Doesn't matter. Then what does matter? I thought for a second. Not wasting food. He gave me a thumbs up. Smart girl. Ethan also tried to reach out to my friends. Mia Red sent me a screenshot of their chat. Ethan, how is she? Mia, great. She'd be even better if you never showed up again. Ethan, I need to see her. Mia, I suggest you go look in the mirror at the accident scene. I laughed for a long time. Mia sent me a voice message. Babe, you finally look like yourself again. Before, you smiled like you were always cleaning up Ethan's messes. I texted back. Thanks. That was disgusting, but accurate. She replied instantly. Come out for hot pot tonight to celebrate your return to the land of the living. I was going to say no. Asher happened to be there to change my dressing and heard the voice message. He asked, why aren't you going? My arm still hurts. Your right hand works. My leg still hurts too. You can walk slowly. I looked at him. You really want me to go? He said. You can't keep locking yourself in the past. I'm not locking myself in. He stared at me. Then go eat hot pot. I couldn't argue with him. That night, when Mia saw Asher standing next to me, her eyes lit up. Who's this? Before I could speak, Asher said. Asher Grant, her attending physician. Mia drew out the word. Oh, attending physician. I kicked her under the table. She winced, then leaned in and whispered. This one's a keeper, cold on the outside, protective on the inside. I coughed. Stop talking nonsense. Mia looked at me, then at Asher, and smiled knowingly. The hot pot steam rose around us. I hadn't eaten this well in a long time. When I was with Ethan, he hated spicy food. So I'd given up spice entirely. He hated crowded places. So I'd stopped going out with friends. He thought my friends were too loud. So I'd turned down Mia's invitations again and again. In the end, my entire life revolved around his preferences. But tonight, I ate from the spicy broth. I ordered beef tripe, tofu cubes, and beef tendon. I ate until my eyes watered from the spice. Mia handed me a tissue. Are you crying from the spice or because of the asshole? I wiped my eyes. The spice. Asher said, a glass of warm water next to me. Slow down. Mia clicked her tongue. Dr. Grant, do you treat all your patients like this? Asher looked at her. No. My hand froze. Mia leaned forward, even more interested. Then why Lena? Asher handed me my chopsticks. She's my priority patient. Mia almost fell off her chair laughing. My ears burned. Asher. He looked completely normal. Your face is red from the spice. Mia banged the table. Dr. Grant, does no one ever hit on you? Asher looked at me. Some do. I stared into my water glass, pretending I hadn't heard. Mia's eyes got even bigger. And did you say yes? Asher slowly picked up a piece of bok choy. No. Why not? He said calmly. The person I'm waiting for wasn't available. I almost choked on my water. Mia looked at me like she was watching a soap opera. I whispered, stop saying things like that. Asher looked at me. I'm not making it up. In that moment, the restaurant was loud. The broth was bubbling. But I heard every word clearly. My heart skipped a beat. I'd just crawled out of a terrible relationship. I shouldn't be falling for someone. I couldn't be falling for someone. But Asher didn't push me. He just pushed the box of tissues closer. Don't be nervous. Eat. Like he'd Jew. Se commented on the weather. But I knew he hadn't. When I got home that night, Ethan was standing downstairs. When he saw Asher drop me off, his face turned ugly instantly. Lena. I got out of the car. Why are you here again? He looked at Asher. Are you two together now? I frowned. That's none of your business. He laughed bitterly. We've only been divorced a few weeks. You were seeing Chloe plenty before we got divorced. The smile disappeared from his face. It wasn't like that between us. I looked at him. Do you still think the only kind of betrayal is sleeping with someone? Ethan. Betrayal comes in many forms. You gave her your patience. You gave her your time. You gave her your instinct. And then you told me to be considerate. Were you ever faithful to me? His face went white as a sheet. Asher stood beside me, not saying a word, but his presence alone was enough to make Ethan uncomfortable. Ethan suddenly asked, do you love him? I didn't answer. The pain in his eyes deepened. You really love him? I looked at him. Whether I love someone or not is not for you to judge. Ethan stepped forward. Asher stepped in front of me. Ethan snapped. Get out of my way. Asher. Asher's voice was cold. She doesn't want to talk to you. Who are you to speak for her? Asher looked at me. I said, he's right. Ethan froze completely. Before, the second he frowned, I'd start explaining. Now I wouldn't give him a single extra word. Ethan's eyes were red. Lena, I really am sorry, I said. You being sorry doesn't mean I have to forgive you. His voice cracked. But he didn't use the manipulative words I hated. I've been replaying that day over and over. If I'd saved you first, would everything be different? I smiled slightly. No. He froze. I said. Even without the crash, we would have ended up here. The accident just sped up the inevitable. He looked like all the strength had been drained from him. I continued. Ethan. I don't want to hate you. So stop reminding me of what happened. That hurt him more than any insult. The light in his eyes went out completely. He stood there for a long time, not moving. I turned and walked into the building. Asher walked with me to the elevator. I said, you see, I bring a lot of drama. He said, I don't mind drama. I looked up at him. He added, but you do. I was silent. He always saw right through me. I was scared. Scared of jumping from one hole into another. Scared that people start out good and then change. Scared that I was mistaking gratitude for love because someone had saved me once. The elevator doors opened. Beefo. I got in. Asher suddenly said, Lena, I'm not going to chase you. I froze. He stood outside the elevator. His eyes calm. You don't have to feel pressured. I'm just going to stand here. When you're ready to move forward, You'll know I'm here. The elevator doors closed slowly. I watched his face disappear behind the metal. And my chest ached. True love isn't about pulling someone into your arms. It's about giving them space to breathe. And giving them time to heal. My wounds slowly healed. I took off the bandages. I could walk normally again. The scar on my forehead faded to a faint line. Life felt like it was starting over. I found a new apartment and grew a pot of mint on the windowsill. I made myself breakfast every morning. I ate dinner at the little restaurant down the street. I went out for drinks with Mia sometimes. And her insults about Ethan got more and more creative. Asher still showed up occasionally. Not too often, but always exactly when I needed him. He was there for my follow-up appointments. He was there when I moved. When I couldn't sleep because of construction upstairs. He sent me a pair of earplugs the next day. I asked him how he knew. He said, "You posted on Instagram stories at 3 a.m. saying you wanted to tear down the ceiling." I replied, "You look at Instagram stories." He said, "Only my priority patients." I stared at my phone and laughed for 10 minutes. Mia said I was done for. I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Your smile is bigger than the hot pot broth we had last week." I told her to shut up. She laughed like she'd won the lottery. Ethan showed up again a month later. I was at the grocery store. In the frozen section, I saw him standing in front of the seafood case, holding a box of shrimp. When he saw me, he immediately put it back. He moved so fast he looked like a kid who'd been caught stealing. I couldn't help laughing. He saw me smile. And his eyes softened. "Lena." I pushed my shopping cart and nodded. He looked at the things in my cart. Pumpkin, eggs, greens, and a candy apple. He said softly, "How have you been?" "Good. Are you okay living alone?" "I am." He smiled bitterly. "You used to say eating alone was sad." I said, "That depends on who you're eating with." He fell silent. I started to push my cart away. He suddenly said, "Chloe left." I paused. "Oh, her family sent her to live with relatives out of state." I didn't react. He continued. "She finally admitted she'd grabbed me on purpose that day." I gripped the handle of my shopping cart. I felt nothing. Ethan looked at me. When I found out the truth, I was completely lost. I said, "Ethan." He immediately fell silent, waiting for my judgment. "That's between you and her. I don't want to hear about it anymore." The disappointment in his eyes was overwhelming. "You really don't care at all." I thought about it carefully. Yes. That one word cut deeper than any knife. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Lena, I keep dreaming about that day. I dream about you calling my name from the car. And I walk away with her." I looked at him. "Then you should be grateful when you wake up." "Grateful for what?" "Grateful that it was just a dream for you. It was real for me." All the color drained from his face. I pushed my cart toward the checkout. After a few steps, I stopped. "Ethan." He looked up. I said, "Don't dream about me anymore. I don't want to work overtime in your regrets." With that, I walked to the checkout. As I was paying, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw Asher standing there, holding 2 cartons of milk. I froze. "What are you doing here?" He glanced at the candy apple in my cart. "Buying milk." "Do you live around here now?" I moved. I narrowed my eyes. "When?" "Yesterday." "Why?" He set the milk on the counter. "It's closer to the hospital." I stared at him. "It's a 25-minute drive to the hospital from here." He was silent for 2 seconds. "It's also closer to you." The cashier laughed out loud. My face turned bright red. "Asher Grant. You're getting less and less subtle." He paid for his milk and picked up the bag. "You don't understand subtle." I glared at him. He looked at me, a faint smile in his eyes. "Come on. I'll walk you home. I can walk by myself." He took the heaviest bag of groceries from my cart. "You can walk. I'll carry the groceries." I laughed and looked down. Outside the grocery store, Ethan was still standing there. He watched Asher carry my groceries, and his eyes looked like they'd been stabbed. This time, he didn't come over. I didn't look back. Winter came quickly. The scar from the accident faded completely. leaving only a faint mark. I cut my hair short. Mia said I looked like the main character in a revenge drama. I said, "Stop watching so many soap operas." She said, "You are a soap opera." On my birthday, I'd planned to just have dinner with Mia, but she texted me at the last minute saying she had to work overtime and told me to go to the restaurant first. When I arrived, the lights were on in the private room. I pushed the door open. Mia wasn't there, only Asher. On the table was a cake. Not a huge, fancy one, a small one, covered in strawberries. Next to it was a bowl of pumpkin oatmeal. I stood in the doorway, frozen. Asher stood up. "Happy birthday, Lena Carter." I stared at the bowl of oatmeal. My nose burned. Last year, I'd waited for Ethan until midnight on my birthday. This year, I'd thought I wouldn't care anymore, but it turned out I still cared. I was just scared of being disappointed again. Asher walked over to me. "Mia's next door. She said she'd give me 10 minutes alone with you." I laughed. She sold me out pretty easily. I bought her hot pot too. Do it. I sat down. "Dr. Grant, are you bribing my friends?" "It's called networking." He stuck a candle in the cake and lit it. The small flame reflected in his eyes. "Make a wish." I closed my eyes. I thought for a long time. In the end, I only wished for one thing, that from now on, I would never lose myself again for someone else's love. When I opened my eyes, Asher was looking at me. "What did you wish for? If I tell you, it won't come true." "Let me guess." "Go ahead," he said. "You wished for yourself to be happy." I froze. He looked at me. "That wish will come true, even if you don't say it out loud." My heart felt like it had been touched gently. Mia finally burst through the door from next door. 10 minutes are up. I'm starving. A few more friends followed her, carrying presents. The room suddenly filled with noise and laughter. Someone sang happy birthday. Someone cheered for me to cut the cake. Asher stood to the side and handed me the cake knife. I cut the first piece and gave it to Mia. The second piece I gave to Asher. He took it and whispered, "Thank you." I said, "I should be thanking you." He looked at me. "Stop saying thank you." What should I say instead? The room was loud around us, but he said it clearly, like he was speaking only to me. "Say you're happy." I held the cake and suddenly smiled. "I'm happy." When I said those words, I realized I truly meant them. I didn't have to wait for anyone to come home. I didn't have to watch anyone's mood. I didn't have to prove I was worthy of love over another woman's tears. I was just sitting here, eating my birthday cake, and that was enough. After the birthday dinner, Asher walked me home. It was cold outside. He held out his scarf to me. I didn't take it. "You wear it." "I'm not cold." "Is that all men ever say?" He looked at me. "Want me to say something else?" "Like what?" He wrapped the scarf around his own neck, then bent down slightly, bringing his face closer to mine. "I'm cold. So will you come a little closer?" I froze for 2 seconds, then laughed out loud. "Asher Grant, you're getting bad." He smiled too. A small, soft smile that took my breath away. I took a step closer to him. "Is this close enough?" "Not quite. Don't push your luck." He said it, but he didn't move any closer. He was always like that, saying he wanted more, but always leaving the choice to me. I looked at him and suddenly asked, "When did you first meet me?" Asher was quiet for a second. "A long time ago." "How long?" "College." I froze. "We met in college." "You don't remember?" He stared at the streetlight in the distance. "Sophomore year. It was pouring rain outside the library. I didn't have an umbrella. You gave me your blue umbrella and said I didn't have to return it." I tried to remember. It sounded familiar. That day, I'd been in a hurry to meet Ethan. I'd seen a guy standing under the awning, half soaked, and handed him my spare umbrella before running off. I asked, "What happened to the umbrella?" Asher said, "I still have it." My heart skipped a beat. "You've kept it all this time?" Why?" He looked at me. "That day, you ran into the rain to meet someone who wasn't me." My breath caught in my throat. Asher's voice was calm. But every word landed heavily. I saw you a few times after that. You were bringing Ethan water at the football field. You were saving him a seat in the cafeteria. You were waiting for him at the school gate. I thought then that you only had eyes for him. Then I saw you in the hospital. You were wheeled in, blood covering half your face, still calling his name. And I realized that after all these years, you still only saw him. My throat tightened. Asher, he said. It's okay. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I just wanted you to know that I didn't start caring about you because of the accident. And I didn't show up because you got divorced. Lena Carter. I've been standing here for a very long time. The wind blew between us. I suddenly remembered that blue umbrella. I remembered all those years ago. Handing it to a stranger and running into the rain. I'd been running toward Ethan. I never knew someone had been watching me from behind. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. It made me crash and burn before I finally saw the person who'd been standing in the rain with me all along. My eyes led with tears. Why didn't you say something sooner? Asher smiled slightly. Say what? That you loved me. He looked at me, his eyes deep. You didn't need me then, and now? I regretted the question as soon as I asked it. It sounded too much like an answer. But Asher didn't press his advantage. He just took the scarf from around his neck and gently wrapped it around mine. There's no rush. I looked down at the scarf. Aren't you scared I'll never say yes? I am. Then why wait? He looked at me. Waiting isn't the hardest part. The hardest part is watching someone keep running into a wall and not being able to pull them away. Tears finally fell down my face. Not for Ethan. For Asher, who'd waited so long. And for myself, who'd loved the wrong person for so many years. I wiped my tears away. Asher, I might not be okay right away. I know. I might be scared. I might pull back. I might doubt you. I know. I might be a lot of trouble. He looked at me. Lena Carter. You're not trouble. You. A survivor. Those words hit me right in the heart. I couldn't help it anymore. I reached out and hugged him. Softly. Slowly. Like I was hugging a spring that had come too late. Asher didn't hug me back immediately. He waited 2 seconds. Then rested his hand gently on my back. His touch was light, but steady. I buried my face in his shoulder. I'm cold, he said. Then hugged me longer. I laughed through my tears. I thought you said you weren't going to chase me. Then what is this? He leaned down. His voice clear in my ear. This is you taking a step forward. After the new year, I received a package from Ethan. Inside were the things that had been left in the wrecked car. My hair clip, a parking ticket, a broken lipstick, and a ring, our wedding band. It had fallen somewhere during the crash and been found when the car was being repaired. There was a letter inside. Ethan had written pages. He wrote about visiting all the places we'd been together. He wrote about finally realizing how much I'd done for him. He wrote about learning to make pumpkin oatmeal, learning to remember allergies, learning to check the weather and tell someone to bring an umbrella. At the end, he wrote, Lena, if I could go back, I would run to you first that day. I read it. Then folded the letter back up. Asher came out of the kitchen with a glass of water. He saw the box but didn't ask about it. I took out the ring. There was a deep scratch on the band, like the last piece of evidence from the crash. Asher said, Do you want to throw it away? I shook my head. I'm going to give it back to him. Want me to come with you? No. I stared at the ring. Some roads I have to walk alone. That evening, I met Ethan by the river. He'd lost a lot of weight. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. Then he saw that I was alone. And he looked relieved. Lena. I handed him the box. These are yours. He didn't take it. Just stared at the ring. It was ours. I said. Not anymore. His throat moved. Did you read the letter? I did. And Ethan. I cut him off. I didn't come here to give you another chance. I came here to give you closure. The light in his eyes slowly dimmed. The river wind was cold. We stood half a meter apart. But 7 years separated us. He said. I really have changed. I know. You don't believe me. I do. He froze. I looked at him. I believe you'll remember people's allergies from now on. I believe you'll look at the person next to you first in a car crash. I believe you'll come home on your wife's birthday. I believe you'll think twice before running to someone who calls you. His eyes filled with tears. Then why can't it be you? I smiled slightly. Because those things are for the next person, not for me, who had to pay for them with 7 years and a car crash. He froze completely. I placed the ring in his palm. Ethan, you'll be a better man someday. But I won't be the one who teaches you. He looked down at the ring in his hand, like it was burning him. After a long time, he asked, "Is Asher good to you?" I said, "He is." He smiled bitterly. "Better than me." I looked out at the river. He never told me to wait. Tears finally fell down Ethan's face. I didn't comfort him. Once, the smallest frown from him would have felt like the end of the world. Now, him crying just felt like wind. He whispered, "I lost you, Lena." I shook my head. "No, I found myself." With that, I turned and walked away. When I was far away, I looked back. Ethan was still standing by the river, holding the ring in his hand. The sunset stretched his shadow long behind him. He finally looked like a man who'd lost the love of his life. Too bad I wasn't the woman who loved him anymore. On the way back, I saw Asher standing under a streetlight. He hadn't come close. He'd just waited from a distance. I walked over to him. "I thought you said you wouldn't come," he said. "I didn't come with you." I looked at him. He added, "I came to pick you up." I laughed. "Dr. Grant, you're very good at finding loopholes." He handed me a cup of hot milk tea. Reward for finishing the past. I took the milk tea. "What about the future?" He looked at me. "How do you want to walk it?" I took a sip of the milk tea. It was sweet. Sweeter than my life had ever been before. I reached out and took hold of his sleeve. Slowly, Asher looked down at my hand on his sleeve. Just the sleeve. My ears turned red. "Don't push your luck." He was silent for 2 seconds. Then he held out his hand, palm up, in front of me. He didn't rush me. He didn't touch me. He just waited for me to choose. I looked at his hand and laughed. This man couldn't even push his luck without following the rules. I placed my hand in his. He closed his fingers around mine. Steady. Not tight enough to hurt. Not loose enough to let me go. The streetlights came on one by one. I remembered a long time ago, trapped in that car, calling Ethan's name. He'd said, "Wait a second." Those words had pushed me into the dark. Then Asher had appeared. He'd said, "Don't sleep. Do you hear me?" Those words had pulled me back into the light. That's the cruel irony of life. The person you love with all your heart teaches you how to give up. The person you saved by accident ends up saving you. I looked up at Asher. "Do you still have that blue umbrella?" He looked at me, a smile in his eyes. "I do. Show it to me sometime." "Okay, Asher." I used to have terrible taste in men, I noticed. I glared at him. He squeezed my hand gently, his voice serious. "It's better now. How do you know?" He stopped walking and looked at me. "Because you're looking at me now." I froze for a second, then laughed out loud. The wind blew, carrying the faint scent of spring. I suddenly realized that the day of the crash, it wasn't just the car door that had broken. It was the old life that had been trapping me, and I'd finally walked out of it. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for anyone. That belated regret trailing behind me could never catch up to the wind of my new beginning.